This is Ethan Lewis, and my tackle football team won the Super Bowl. My team is the Grace Lake Colts Big Ten football team. You can find the on Grace Lake Central Rams YouTube. And my number was 88, and we won.
Woo!
Get some.
And you got a fumble in the Super Bowl game, right?
Forced a fumble.
Yeah.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Get some.
That a boy.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters.
Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
And I'm Gold Eagle Jake.
And we are fortunate enough to be at Gary's house recording tonight. We got an extra special treat. We tasted through the entire lineup of the Bardstown Collection that has only one thing to do with Bardstown Distilling. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. We're also here with Matt from Lake County Whiskey Club. So good to have both of you guys here. Thanks again for hosting.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, was a blast.
Both of you guys' second time on the podcast.
Yes,
by the way. Yeah, because we did a Lake County episode, and you were part of the Bacta episodes. So
yes,
welcome back. If these voices sound familiar, we've got some repeat guests. So thank you guys for hopping on tonight. But yeah, we're got together tonight to taste through all the different Bardstown collections, and I believe these were from 2024.
This is all 7 bottles from the 2024 Bardstown Collection release that were released in, I believe, April of this year. As part of the series they do. This is their 3rd year of releases. What they do is basically, it started off 2 years ago with 5 distilleries, all Bardstown local, that are original to Bardstown. And then this year it grew to 7 this year. They added in, last year was 6, and they added in 7th for this year.
Nice. And for anybody that doesn't know, this is specifically driven towards charity to some degree.
Yes. So basically all the Bardstown releases go out and they basically say, we want the original Bardstown distilleries involved in coming up with, they kind of give them free reign over what they want to produce. Mm-hmm. They want to try and showcase some of their best stuff for the year. And the money goes back into supporting local organizations in the town of Bardstown, whether it's restoring their downtown, local charities, their school districts, things like that. The money is intended, these are significantly priced bottles. We'll get to that. But what they do basically is say, put out your best. The only, real rule they have is they're going to go in these special bottles. They're all going to be packaged the same. They're all going to be released on these 2 weekends. It's going to showcase heritage of Bardstown. We want to showcase our downtown. We want to showcase our history, and all the money going into these bottles is going back into the community in some way.
Yeah, which is super unique. I don't know of anything else quite like this on this scale. So
definitely not on the scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's super cool that all of these 7 distilleries have banded together to try and do something for their community.
Yeah, Lexington and Louisville, what the F are you doing? Where are you at? Time to catch up. But yeah, no, I mean, Bardstown's the bourbon capital of the world. It's where bourbon started. So it just kind of makes sense that something like this starts in Bardstown, Kentucky. But, and also, I think it's very cool that they are using the same packaging, and they are releasing them all together on the same couple of weekends, and the same price point, too.
Right. They do set a price, no matter if your juice goes in at, I think the youngest we tasted was 4 to 6 year blends, all the way up to 20 years. It's all set at the same price point to make sure everything you're getting is going right back in at the same price, the same bottle collection. The distillers many times will sign the bottles before they go in the packaging. It's a very cool experience to go down for the release of these bottles.
Yeah, I mean, this is covering distilleries from near craft to absolute monsters. So it's really cool to see that too.
And have them all band together. But
Yeah.
Gary, you mentioned the release of these bottles is very cool. Can you elaborate on that and how are you able to obtain these? Because for those that don't know, they're not distributed. You have to buy them at the distillery, and it's only at set times. So how did you obtain one of each of these bottles? And I think you got more than one of each of these.
So I did actually luck out.
Three, I think.
So I'm part of a few whiskey clubs in the area. I also have a whiskey club in Ohio that was started from a guy in Chicago that happened to move out to Ohio that I've known for many years. That whiskey club in Ohio specifically is very focused on charitable events. Every single barrel that we pick for that club happens to be 100% to charity. So we distribute the clubs to members. They pay an extra fee, and 100% of that actually goes to human trafficking. That's my Sacred Sippers Club in Ohio. But
what's the website? Can anybody join that?
We're kind of in a little bit of a change up. Our founding member has actually retired from the club to move on into ministry.
Okay.
It actually started through ministry. What better way to draw men to church than say we're going to open a bottle of whatever tonight? And the only stipulation is you have to listen to an hour of whatever men's ministry we're going to talk about that night. We do have a Facebook page. It is Sacred Sippers. You can go out. You can join that page. Feel free to use my name as a reference and just mention the podcast, and we'll let you join the page. But
obviously, it's for a great cause. Anybody that's interested in that, for sure, check that out on Facebook.
Reach out to me, reach out to the Facebook page. I'd happy to give you more information on that. But what they basically did is, because we've done many things with many of these distilleries, they offered us the opportunity to come down on a sponsored trip. Mint Julep actually runs a program where they take very small groups, and it's a 2-day experience where you go to 4 of the distilleries on day 1 and 3 of the distilleries on day 2, and you get to sit down and actually do a tasting experience at each distillery. And every distillery we went to actually compared either their pick for this year against some of their flagship product, or in the case of Heaven Hill, what they actually did was they have been part of the program since the beginning. They did a comparison of all 3 years, plus a very special bottle at the end that they did not let us know until we happened to, pry it out of him. He's like, "You really want to know?" And he walked out with a VVS 13 and said, "This was your special pick for doing what you guys do."
Nice.
And by the way, we have a bottle for y'all to take home.
Oh, cool.
BVS 13, what is that?
The Old Fitzgerald. It is the 13-year bottled and bond.
That was last year's.
It was the 2024 spring release. It was released distillery only. You'll notice it is the brown label, which signifies that it's a distillery only release, not for distribution, and is probably in my top 3 whiskeys of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, where is it? Let's taste it.
Yeah.
It's upstairs in the cabinet. You want to
Yeah, we used Mint Julep 2 years ago when we took some friends down as part of the podcast, and Mint Julep was awesome. So for sure, check them out if you're looking to do a tour.
That's what we did when we went to Makers. Greg set us up with Mint Julep. So.
Yeah,
They're
they're
a phenomenal
awesome.
company if you're looking to explore the Bourbon Trail in any way. They host groups from 6 to bus size. So anything you want, they will make sure they take care of you.
And we went to the Heaven Hill experience in the Bardstown area. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, our reservation wasn't correct. And they were like, "You don't understand. This is the Bourbon Matters podcast." And they gave us super special treatment. So I was like, wow, we got lucked out on that for sure.
That's awesome. Bourbon Matters. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of you listeners out there watching this on the release, please share.
Yeah, please. Subscribe, share, rate.
Absolutely. So yeah. So each of these distilleries released a very special bourbon. They got to choose what was in it. You have to buy them at the distillery. They're all priced at $265.
So with tax out the door, every bottle is $265.
Okay.
Any
So-
comments on that price point
Well,
before we dive into them?
I mean, it's quite high.
it is a high price
in
point
general.
for, but like I said, we have ranges from 6-year bourbons up to 20-year bourbons. So, you know, if you take the, year per, $10 per year and single barrel one-offs, you're really not out of the realm of paying it. Plus, a very significant chunk of every one of these bottles above cost of the juice going in is going back into the Bardstown community in some way. I personally have no problem paying that for a bottle, knowing that it goes into a great cause such as that.
Yeah.
Now, tasting through them, which we'll get to how we kind of set up our blind tasting of all these, you will realize that could you have got a much better bourbon on some of these for the same price, or 4 bottles at the same
Yeah.
price? Yes, that'll happen. But are you getting a one-time experience? Are you getting something going back to something that matters? Are you getting something you'll never taste again? That's part of the price that goes into the bottle.
And also
And
part of
some is just the
bourbon.
charity and
Yeah,
like
it's
you know.
part of bourbon is getting together with people and talking about what you're tasting and sharing it with each other, and that's exactly what we did here tonight.
Yeah, and there's 6 other people over here tonight
Yeah,
that
we did
aren't on the podcast that we
Yeah,
shared
you
this
guys probably
experience
wouldn't
with.
have
So
wanted to listen to this episode if we had all 10 people.
yeah.
No offense to them, but it would just kind of be a shit show of everyone
Yeah.
tossing in their opinions. But yeah, so that's kind of the fun of bourbon, and I think we, like you said, we'll go into the results in a little bit, but we all kind of concluded that there's better options out there, but these are, if you will, these are unicorns in the bourbon world because you can only get them on certain weekends in Kentucky, and it's all these distilleries kind of making a pact together to put something that they think is significant to their distillery in these bottles, and share it with everyone just for this one specific release. And like you said, the money going back to the community, and the charity aspect just makes it absolutely worth it, I think, to any bourbon
Right, and
connoisseur.
it also talks about the strength in where the bourbon community backs each other. As much as they compete on the shelf for space, price, volume, when it's all said and done, I mean, I think back to like the Heaven Hill story when the big fire. It wasn't, oh great, the competitor is now knocked out of the business.
Right.
It's you can start distilling with us tomorrow.
Here,
Yeah.
we'll give you
keep
some
you-
barrels and
yes.
keep you guys going.
We'll keep you afloat.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of the bourbon world. I mean, bourbon. I love to just have people over, opening 7 bottles of $265 bottles to share with friends isn't exactly, it's not cheap, but that's what bourbon is supposed to do. I want you to try this with me.
Yeah.
I want you to come to my home. I want to host. I want you to give me your thoughts on this. And, we'll see some of these when we talk about our tasting, but we had people, most of us that were in the tasting were very, we're bourbon aficionados. We've tried 1,000 bourbons.
we at least pretend to be.
At least we've tasted enough to say, hey, I can compare this across.
Yeah.
Everyone
others.
part of the panel tonight was part of multiple whiskey clubs. Has, I think you said it right. Like we've tasted over 1,000 bourbons
Easily.
So we're not your best of the best. We're not your master distillers, but we all have a very acclimated palate to bourbon, and especially these distilleries that are pretty well known.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and like this is a particularly interesting instance where like usually in a blind tasting you have variation in I guess the quality to price ratio.
Typically,
You
you're
know-
gonna match up ages and match up proofs, and
Right.
You know,
Where this was, I mean, we did this completely blind. Everything is the exact same price point, so you're expecting exactly the same quality. So this is a really cool opportunity to try 7 bourbons from 7 completely different distilleries at totally different age points and different proof points, and really pick out the nuances in each one. And I mean, we did our best to not rate them against each other because we're not trying to
that was Gary's rule.
They were
Yeah.
definitely very different. I mean, some of them
Oh,
were
yeah.
not even distilled the same way.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, we had some wheat, some non. I mean, they were
Yes.
definitely not similar products.
Yeah, which is this is like why it's so cool is because they're given such freedom to do whatever they want to do in these releases.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And like it's really, I think, probably the best case scenario of put your best product forward and
The
see
only-
what happens.
The only
you
real
know?
limit was there's only 500 bottles of each one.
Yeah.
So they're all hand labeled, hand numbered with the bottle. Many are signed by the distillers. When you do the experience, I could talk the whole hour on the experience alone, but you're literally sitting down with either a master distiller, master blender on some of the blends, the head brand ambassador. Some of them decided, Heaven Hill actually sat us down. We got to be the soft opening for the new restaurant at Heaven Hill for the tasting experience, and they paired courses they're going to put on their menu with each one of the years.
Oh, nice.
They paired our VVS 13 with this smoked s'mores dessert that they did tableside, and actually burnt the marshmallow at the table. And we sat down at Preservation with their founder, talking about how she got into sourcing 15, 18, 20 year rise. And
Talk about a discrepancy in
Right.
size.
I mean, you're talking. We literally watched at Preservation. They were filling barrels. They were filling their barrel number 7,200
Yeah.
of their own product. They only have 7,000 barrels of their own product,
Yeah.
and they're in the same release as Jim Beam putting out a 20-year barrel.
Yeah, which is probably like 700,000. Like,
They're putting out in a week what Preservation has done since they've been founded 5 years
yeah.
ago, 6 years ago. So, I mean, it's a broad spectrum of flavor profiles, distilling techniques, mash bills, all for one cause.
yeah. So I do you guys want to dive into results then?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great idea. I also want to say one of the things I love that we did tonight is we never looked at how any of these were made.
No, yeah.
Nothing. We went into this with glasses
Completely
blind.
blind.
of
Yeah.
fluid that we had no idea what it was or where it was.
I think the only thing we knew going in was because I asked the question if these were single barrels or not. Gary said that they're limited to 500 bottles, which means they're probably 2-barrel blends.
Sure.
That's about all we knew going into
And
this.
we didn't have a list of the distilleries, but I think we discussed a little bit and listed off the distilleries before,
yeah.
so we kind of knew what the distilleries were. But other than that, we had 8 pours in front of us, although there's only 7 Bardstown Collections
there
because
were.
There was a
Gary
curveball.
threw in a curveball, which I think is a great idea. So
Yeah.
we took the 7 Bardstown Collections, and then Gary threw in a control curveball. Didn't tell us what it was, and that curveball was very interesting because I was thinking before we started the tasting that bottle would have been the perfect thing to throw in there as a curveball, but I did not taste that in the.
For sure did not either.
So yeah, it was a really cool tasting. We did completely blind, and basically the way we set it up was we did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. We had 2 other people pour them blind and keep track of what was what, and then we rated 1 through 10 the nose, the palate, the finish, and the overall thought on that product. and then we took all of our scores, added them together, and averaged it out.
Right. So you could get a max score basically of 40 on any bottle.
Right.
Yep.
I will say before we start discussing number results for these bottles, we're all very harsh critics.
Yeah, I don't,
will
and no one
say-
got over 30. I'm pretty sure, right?
I think our
the
highest
total?
score was about a 32. Right
Was it?
about.
Okay.
Yeah,
But-
we had a couple people putting like 7s and
Yeah.
But like I said, we actually went back and were like, were you doing 1 through 5? And none of these bottles, in all honesty, deserve a score, below, there's no shame in drinking any one of these bottles.
no.
I would go
Yeah,
back and
yeah.
revisit any one of them. I think as part of it, it's very hard to take, when you have 8 glasses in front of you, it's very hard to not be comparative.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
hardest part is trying to taste each one and say, if I only drank this bottle, here's my score on that bottle. Because when we started discussing at the table, we were trying to not influence each other's scoring. But it's very hard when it's like, oh, well, I tasted this one, and I was going to give this a higher score, but I can't make it higher than this one because I like this one better. And we had already written down our numbers. That does make a difference in it. But I think where we ended up in general was a pretty broad consensus of, these, when it came down to at least the top 3, we were in a very broad consensus that those top 3 were phenomenal.
Yeah, I think
overall phenomenal.
the
bottles.
top 3 were within like 2 or 3 points of each other,
Oh, I
like
think it
across
came
the
down,
board.
Like one of them was
so
like 1/8 of a point
Yeah.
better than the other. And we
Right.
get to off there. So
yeah, and like I think the other thing is in the back of everyone's mind, these are $260 bottles, so it's like
being harsher.
you're being particularly harsh.
Yeah, I think the scores would have been much higher if we didn't know the price point.
Yes. Yeah.
But we knew we were getting together to taste the Bardstown Collection, and
Right.
we knew that those were $265.
So like
bottles.
add 10 points to all of these. That's probably
So
what like
that was in the back of our minds too.
I think an easy 5-point add to the final score of any of these bottles is a fair one,
For
except
sure.
Yeah.
for maybe the
Yeah.
last one.
I don't know. Some people liked it a lot.
I didn't mind it.
I
So
thought it was pretty good. I would drink it again all day. But
well, with that, let's jump into
Let's
bottom
jump
to
in.
top. I think you've got the list right.
I do. Did we number them?
this is the
I've got
rating order.
My
from
list is in one
bottom
of
to
those.
top, and this is
Okay.
the proof and the distillery, and then I can talk. I pulled up the actual what that barrel is.
All right. So, all right. Just make sure I got this right. All right. So let's list them all off first. In no particular order, we have Preservation Distillery, Lux Row Distillery, Jim Beam Distillery, Bardstown Bourbon Company, Heaven Hill, Log Still, Limestone Branch, and then we had a curveball, which
did.
nobody
Yes.
knew what it was.
I did not
Completely
tell it.
blind.
I knew what it was,
Gary
but I did not know
slipped it in
what
there,
where it was, or
was
yeah.
in
and
the-
you
in the
couldn't
blind.
even
Which honestly,
pick it out.
I mean, now knowing what it was like the perfect throw-in because it's like the perfect middle of the road.
It is. It's a
Right.
good benchmark to
Yeah,
base
for
off
sure,
other
yeah.
spirits. It drinks like it should cost a lot more, and it's bottled and bond, 100 proof. So
Yeah,
it's a good.
it's a
good baseline.
really nice baseline. Yeah,
Okay.
It fit in nicely.
yeah, for sure.
So should I go ahead and give
Let's
out
start
the,
with-
the
Yeah, let's
last?
go with the
Let's go with
lowest.
last place, unfortunately.
So last place, which again, like this wasn't. It wasn't a bad bourbon. It was just, I think it stood out to everyone. It was very off profile, in my opinion, from the rest of them.
Yeah, for sure. Like what jumped out to me the most on this one was the nose.
Let me say what it is.
Yeah,
So-
go ahead.
So it's Limestone Branch Distillery.
Yeah.
was in last place, and
So-
the nose jumped at everyone.
Like like
Everybody said
At
it was
least-
the most distinct nose
Yes,
of all
for sure.
8 pours.
Smelled
Like, by
crafty,
far,
it smelled
yeah.
young, Play-Doh was thrown out there. A couple
Yeah.
times.
Specifically yellow Play-Doh.
Yellow Play-Doh.
I don't know about the color, but
So the Limestone Branch release, it is a 6-year-old, 100% pot stilled, wheated bourbon, 28% red winter wheat. It says which their goal was to produce an exceptionally approachable yet complex whiskey.
So what's really interesting about that is that red winter wheat was only part of their experimental rick house.
Correct. They've never done that in their other
Right.
normal off the
And, like,
retail shelf.
that's a staple of Makers, right?
Makers does.
And
Ben Holiday.
And Ben Holiday,
Um,
which is interesting that they decided to do
Whiskey
that.
Acres?
I don't think Whiskey Acres is Red Winter.
Okay.
I don't.
Where's Dan?
This is where fucking Dan, isn't here to tell us about wheat sex and which
I don't know,
weed
I
is
thought-
what.
For some
But
reason I thought, but he's gonna be like, "You idiots!" I
it's
can't
not.
believe you
It's
thought
not
it
Red
was."
Winter though. I'm like 95% sure it's not Red Winter. But
Alright.
watch him correct me on the next
Yeah.
episode.
everyone
But-
knows is Makers, obviously.
But
Yeah, Makers is the biggest one. But yeah, it's super interesting because a lot of us tried this one and said this is for sure the Whiskey Acres 7-year,
Oh, we thought it was Whiskey Acres for sure. When
which
we were
I
blinding them.
I take as a big compliment
I do
because
too.
this was punching way higher than
Yeah.
you would think it would.
I think the biggest
know,
part about that made us think it was in that they thought it was the curveball I threw in.
Yeah,
And
we
they
did.
Yeah,
thought
for
it was
sure.
Whiskey Acres because of that. Whiskey Acres still has that crafty, younger profile. I mean, their flagship product that they're putting out is still a 7-year
Yeah.
bourbon. With outside of their their popcorn
Yeah.
series.
Well,
stuff
and this to me had that grain forward kind of
soft green.
Soft. It was
taste
soft.
to it,
Very
and
soft.
yeah, it was like
To me, I got a lot of dough, like a
Yes,
It was very
yes, yeah.
doughy.
like a Garrison Brothers, or there's a few that have
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but it's that doughy
Also,
taste and smell.
what's very interesting is I should point out the bottle says Limestone Branch. It does not say Yellowstone
Right,
on the
yeah.
bottle. So when we were at Limestone Branch a couple months ago, they made it very clear that when they were purchased by MGP Luxco, that whole group, they are not allowed to release anything that was distilled in the Limestone Branch name. They could only release Yellowstone bourbon, which was separate. So Limestone Branch did a lot of experimental stuff, which they had a little shipping container where
Very
they
small.
very
Yeah.
very
Outdoor.
small shipping container outdoor where they had a
but
bunch of
Yellowstone
like
is under
15
the MGP.
Yellowstone
label?
is under the MGP.
Oh,
It's not
interesting.
MGP.
Okay.
It's distilled at Limestone Branch, but it's a
But it's a
unique
separate-
mash bill
okay.
that's separate from Limestone Branch Distillery. So when
Oh,
MGP came in and bought Limestone Branch, they said, "All right, no more Limestone Branch, no more releases at all Limestone Branch. Like you cannot release any more Limestone Branch whiskey.
yeah,
Has to
okay.
be Yellowstone, which was separate." And when we were there, they took us in that experimental rick house, and they said a lot of the stuff has aged way too long, and we can't bottle it because MGP won't let us bottle any Limestone Branch distillate. It has to be Yellowstone
And they
distillate.
actually started in the small barrels and worked their way
They
up
were
Yeah.
all
You know,
small barrels
all-
in
They were
there.
all like little 5 gallons.
Little 5 gallon,
Very
15
small.
Oh,
gallon.
wow.
Yeah.
They did a lot of
Yeah, they were tiny.
Sample a few.
We sampled a few, and they were even like, these are probably over oaked. Like we just forgot about them. We need to do something with them. And I have a bottle.
Slap a Lake County Whiskey Club.
I have
Not doing that.
I have a bottle of Limestone Branch Experimental Red Winter Wheat at my house. That's a
Oh, yeah?
375 that I purchased at the distillery when I was there like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I wonder how that compares.
Yeah, so it's interesting that this label is Limestone Branch, and I bet you, not to say that it's bad, but I bet you they were like, all right, we need to use this whiskey that's in the shipping container, and we're not allowed to bottle it in Yellowstone. So this is a good way to bottle some of that, which it's, you know, it didn't hold up to some of the other ones, but it was still good, and it's still, I think, really cool and unique to be able to taste this one-off, because this is a true one-off mash bill.
I don't know where Jake's got my sheet, I think. So I think this was my number 3.
You liked it.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, you liked it.
I actually really liked the nose until
I did as
until
well.
the word Play-Doh was said. I didn't smell it, but once it was said,
I don't get. I never get that. So
It wasn't
it's
my
not like
least favorite. I didn't hate it. It just, compared to the others, it just was a little different. And it lacked a
it's
little bit
way
of
different
complexity.
for sure. Yeah, and like I didn't mind it at all. I quite enjoyed it. I think it's just a profile,
It's different.
style thing.
And I will say for anybody listening to this, it is drastically different than any typical Yellowstone you've ever had.
Yes.
Oh, it doesn't
Not-
taste
Yeah,
anything
no.
like
Right,
Yellowstone.
not tie the
No.
two together
Yeah, no.
ever. They're very, very different.
Yeah, like Jake said, it's definitely an experimental batch type of
I
thing.
can see that
Yeah.
what you're saying now. I never thought about them
I
taking
just
those little barrels.
thought
and
about it
blending
on
the two
this,
together,
but
making 500
I
bottles. and this is
guarantee
what
you
it
that's
is.
probably what they had to do.
I'm sure it is.
And didn't want it to go to waste, and those are truly very kind of rare and you're never
Well,
gonna
I
see 'em
mean, if
again.
you're
So
gonna
to put them in this bottle
Give something
makes
to
sense.
charity.
Yeah,
Do something
Do
like
something
that.
cool
That's a
like that.
real one-off or
You
two
can't
off.
get again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, what we got next?
Next up,
I think it's a curveball.
I
Yeah,
don't think it is.
is it?
No, it
It
is.
is.
No?
Is it?
It is.
It is, yeah. So the next up, which is good because that means these $260 bottles held up. But the next up in the list is Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond.
Yes.
Yeah. So I tried to pick something to throw in from a curveball perspective that I wanted to be one, shelf available.
Yeah.
So you can walk in any store, go
Which,
pick this up.
thank God, this is shelf available now.
Rewind 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a middle of the road proof. It's not, 100 proof is a great, easygoing drinker. It's a 7-year product and it's consistent. When you
Yeah,
know you're
yeah.
buying that bottle, you know exactly what you're going to drink every time.
It's a perfect control, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
right. It's from a
I
big
literally said it
distillery.
when we
it's
started
above
tasting.
average age statement. It's
I was like, Heaven Hill 7
100
would be
proof,
the perfect
yeah.
control to throw in here, but none of us tasted it.
No one
no.
guessed that was
Yeah.
after the tasting. No one thought that would have been that
No.
was what we were drinking at that.
I think
It ranked it scored decent.
like, for
was-
coming second.
well,
but
it was
second to
actually my
last-
last place.
Well, like, I mean,
It was
if you
my
take
last
everything
place.
into account,
But-
it should
but
be.
It should be because
You know,
we're
like-
tasting bottles that are much
Yeah.
more expensive and unique one-off. So
I got to do my per episode Heaven Hill plug. And like, I mean, I think the 7-year Ballad and Bond is like my go-to for old fashions now. Now that it's available, like it's just so perfect for everything.
it's a
Like
good daily.
the
Like,
versatility
great
is
sit
just
down and just have a
fantastic.
pour.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. You like when you get home and you're like, I really want something, but I don't
It's just
know what I want. I don't
snap
wanna
decision,
think about it. I just want
pick
to
it.
drink something.
Yeah.
That's a great pour to grab.
Yeah, and like it.
And at a reasonable price, too.
Very reasonable.
What's about $50, $55?
$44.99
yeah.
right now, Gold Eagle.
Which
with
I mean, like
7-year
one of the
bottled
things that
bond
we
bourbon.
harp on constantly is how much, particularly Heaven Hill and Buffalo Trace have in stock, and like it's probably gonna stay at that price point for a long time because they have so much. So like it's a great whiskey overall. It's like the perfect control whiskey I think for this tasting. So kudos to Gary for picking that.
For the price, it's the best around for bucks and
Under-
it's
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it just lacked a little bit of complexity compared to these other ones for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, but like,
yeah,
you know,
no, I
we're
know,
like,
yeah.
we're nitpicking, like,
$45 bottle again.
right? Yeah,
Great bottle.
So yeah, pick it up at Gold Eagle, $44.99 on sale. Moving on to the next highest rated score.
There's no coupon codes in this episode, by the
No.
way.
No, none of these are available, and the Heaven Hill is already on sale. So
But if you want something close, BM Cock.
let's keep it as the most used coupon code.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe if I have a couple more whiskeys, I'll throw some coupon codes on. So next up in our list, 6th place is Log Still Distillery.
So I believe they're the newest addition this year.
Definitely the newest addition.
So this is the first year they've been
this
included.
is their first year included. I believe it went from the first year was 5 years, first year was 5 distilleries, second year was 6, third year was 7.
Okay.
Log Still's the newest. I think a big part of the Log Still addition was Log Still Distillery has an amazing place for event hosting, drawing people to Bardstown. They have concert amphitheater. They have room and board on site where they can bring people into their distillery. I think they really wanted to showcase this distillery being newer to the area and building out this amazing event space to draw people to Bardstown. They actually approached me to say, why don't you bring your club down for like your annual, board meeting, and we can put you up on site, live music events during the summer. We can set you up. We've got food, we've got tasting rooms, everything all in one. And they're also along the train that runs through from Bardstown, where you do the distillery stops along the train. They're, I think, one of the last stops at their distillery.
Well, that's super cool because we did our "What Would You Do with $100 Million" episode a couple months ago, and that's very in line with what Dan was saying. I don't want to give Dan as much credit, but like they're
creating a destination.
They're building a destination. You
like
go
a hard
there,
truth type of place.
Yes,
where you can go spend a whole day.
It had very hard truth vibes in Bardstown, which there's not a lot of places that have that full experience in Bardstown.
Where like you're not going there just for a tasting. You're going there for a concert or to stay or whatever, right? Like the culinary experience, like the whole package of things to do are there. Like that. Yeah, I think even like across the board in Kentucky, that's not super common, which is pretty cool.
So this one is actually a 9-year-old Kentucky high rye bourbon. So we tasted this one. I definitely can tell it was high rye. It definitely had the pepper notes on this one. I was shocked knowing it was a 9-year. So they're putting out some of their oldest product that they release on their retail brands, and they're stepping up the game and finding some of their oldest barrels to blend into this. Log Still is a high rye mash bill across their board, so they do a very great job in some of them, and they're a very generally low retail price bottle to find. So to find something for them to step into, hey, let's put out a bottle that has our name on it that's going to be in this new price point, I think they really shot for putting forth some of their best product.
I think they did too, and props to them, kudos to them, because like you said, they are the new guy coming into this whole deal, and nobody expects them to have a 9-year-old. They're kind of known for like 4 to 6-year-old range.
Yeah, right.
Then they come out the gate and they're like, here's our oldest product that we have. And I actually had Log Still as my number 1. It was very close with a couple others, but I had it barely coming out as my number 1. And I thought it was Beam. I got a lot of like nuttiness out of it. I thought it was like very mellow and just well-rounded.
I'll caveat that with, after we discussed it, I picked a lot of those notes out.
Yeah.
It has a lot going for it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is probably out of all these distilleries, it's definitely the one I know the least about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew nothing about log still going into my experience of this, and I would never put Logstown on my list when I go to visit Bardstown, Kentucky.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the name you choose. If like I'm going to hit the whiskey trail, and I'm going to go to Beam, I'm going to go to Heaven Hill,
you're
going to go to Bardstown.
like
Where is
4
Log
of the
Still
big
fall?
6 are within
Yeah.
shooting
Well,
distance of Bardstown. So
I only know the name because I've seen ads for it all around Kentucky and Bardstown as like
I feel
a
like we've
music
mentioned
venue.
them before
Maybe
somewhere. Maybe not on the actual show, but talking about stuff
but like I've seen a lot of ads for their concert venue that they have at the distillery. So
And it's a very, very great setup.
really cool
Outdoor
from what I'm seeing.
amphitheater. It's beautiful. I would have never gone, and I will go back now that I did this.
Yeah.
So
Maybe if we do a 2025 Bourbon Matters trip, we can stay there.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll pull some Thieves and Barrels and do a podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
So Log Still, if you're listening, invite us out and we'll come next year.
Yeah.
and thieve some barrels and do an episode and
We're pressuring you
hit
now.
a concert. But yeah, great stuff. Big props to you for throwing in some older aged whiskey into your blend and showing that you can compete with some of the big dogs. So are you ready to move on?
Next up?
Yep.
Next up, I'm gonna let Jake do the honors for this one.
Yeah, so I was particularly upset about this because there was a bottle mix-up.
There was a big bottle mix-up.
There's a Matt. All right, so let me just paint a picture without giving away what exactly happened. But I was unbelievably pumped at what the number 1 bottle was until the referee came in at the last second and said, whoa, wait, hold on. The bottles are mixed up.
I think they were
Not
saying
the pours.
the pours were not.
The pours were not.
just
The bottles that were revealed to
What
us.
they had
revealed.
originally told us on the reveal was not
correct.
With the actual bottles, and thankfully they realized it because we are not the sober ones at this.
Yeah,
tasting.
no.
We did have some people that were the control.
Yes.
And
Yes.
had everything written down and in order.
Yeah.
So thankfully they came through.
Luckily we got this correct.
Jake's dismay.
to my huge dismay, mainly because I wanted to give Dan some shit. I'll still give Dan some shit later on, but buckle up for that. So number 4 from the bottom, which was letter E, was Heaven Hill, coming in at 105 proof. I gotta check my notes on E. E was my number 2 favorite.
And I think E was actually my number 2 as well. It was within 0.2 points of each other.
Yeah, and
So they were very,
I
very
actually
close.
fought between this and what ended up being the number 1 pick, very closely. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. There was one particular element of the one that ended up being the number 1 pick for everybody that kind of put that over the top for me personally. Try not to give it away.
Right.
But this was an excellent pour. I loved it.
This was a
Obviously,
blend
for those
of-
that listen, go ahead and list off
So
what
this
it
is a blend of 7-year and 16-year blended barrels between 7 and 16 years. Now, one thing that surprised me, they proofed it to 105.
Yes. So they actually proofed presumably
had to proof
more
it
than
down.
2 barrels
Yes.
down to 105.
But all barrels that went into the blend were their traditional mash bill 78, 10, 12.
Which I think are the bib.
That is
mash
their bib
bill.
mash bill for Heaven Hill.
Yeah.
So they were all traditional mash bill, but they blended barrels between 7 and 16 years.
So this is
Now, this
basically
doesn't
the Heaven
necessarily
Hill
mean-
Bib Select.
This doesn't necessarily mean it could have come. We don't know. This could have actually come from 10 barrels.
Oh, right, yeah,
All they
sure,
had to do
yeah.
was get it down to 500 bottles.
Right, yeah.
They just said their range was, it's all our Heaven Hill mash bill classic,
Yeah.
and the barrels range from 7 to 16 years old, and it was proof to 105. So
Right.
their master distiller basically said, blending these, the best taste is at that proof.
Yes.
Presumably everything that went into this was a higher proof going in. They tasted through and said 105 was key,
Yeah. Which, I mean,
which is a great tasting proof for the majority of bourbons you're
and
going
is
have.
to be expected from someone the size of Heaven Hill.
Yes.
You know.
And also, none of these were crazy high proof. None of these lacked flavor.
No,
No.
yeah.
They all, none of them tasted like 100 to 110. I think they tasted 110, 115, maybe a little higher.
Yeah, I
only
mean,
because they were bold with flavor.
100
All
was
of
by
these-
100 was the lowest proof
100 was the lowest
for record,
Mhm.
and I don't recall thinking anything was under 100 proof.
No,
Well, no, sorry.
there was maybe one.
I did think some were under 100 proof, but they were all actually at
But they
least
were-
100.
It's so
And-
smooth.
and yeah,
right,
So
yeah.
hot is not the right word because none of them tasted
No,
hot,
no,
but
No.
they
at
just-
all.
They just all
Yeah.
tasted so bold and full of flavor.
Yes,
that,
yeah.
like they didn't taste like they could have been that low.
Yeah, and
because of
I-
how much flavor they carried.
I think with this one forward, the blending was exceptional between these top 5 or 6.
The blending, I think, is what
Is-
won these
Yeah, for sure. Like
these blends. If you will.
from here on out, the proof points go higher, and they all tasted sub 105, probably. I'd say.
I'm gonna pour a little more just while we're talking about it.
I mean, so like, I mean, we're again, just to reiterate, we're nitpicking the shit out of all these. So like, you know, like we're talking about. I mean, like beyond this, I think we're talking about personal preference,
Yes.
Yeah, and also,
a flavor profile, and that's about it. You
Yeah,
know.
and also
Like-
as we mentioned earlier, if we didn't know price point, I think it would.
Oh,
be a little
again,
different,
yeah, right.
But we all knew these costed up $200.
Yeah, I know. For me,
a bottle,
I
so-
didn't rate anything over, I think 28.
Mm-hmm.
like so,
I think-
out of
I mean,
40.
there were-
So like, you
There were
know.
a few tasters that were like, hands down, I love this 40 points.
Yeah,
You know,
Mm-hmm. One.
One. Who shall remain nameless and is not on this
I
podcast.
didn't give any single category a 10. The highest I
Right.
gave any single category was a
I
9.
I gave a
1
9.
9.
I gave
Yeah,
a 9.
same.
9.
Yes.
Same.
Yes, so-
I mean, part of that's the price point, but you know, I think when part of this experience, I think, is understanding that you're talking about a $250 bottle,
Mhm.
and you should be a little stingy,
Mhm.
you know. But I mean,
gave out any nines.
I gave-
Really?
I gave
Oh, wow.
1, and
I think I get.
okay,
I think I gave a 9. I gave a 9
I don't
to
think Ed did.
3. There were 3
Did he give
nines
a
I
6?
gave out. I gave a
Everything
9.
was below 6.
what was his low? His low score was like a 7 total.
There was definitely one like a couple bottles for Ed. Like I won't drink this again, but it's also personal taste.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean that's a personal taste. And we did have a range of drinkers in there. Some were novice, some were like us that have been in clubs and done hundreds of single.
Well,
barrels.
right.
Yeah,
I mean, like, yeah, a lot of us
so-
are particularly picky, I
Yes.
think, because,
very much so.
yeah.
So I think we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think we
what's
can.
up next?
So this is where it gets really interesting because I think the top 2 we all kind of expected would be in there, but I think these next 2 maybe not. So next,
the next
up,
one's the surprise for me.
is it? So I would think maybe it would be a surprise for me, but also not because of all the resources that they have.
True. And some of the phenomenal barrel picks that we've gotten out of there.
We have.
Yes.
but most of them, like, they are phenomenal, but they are very young.
Yes.
And we know they don't have a lot of older stuff that's their own.
And this was one of the youngest we tasted out of all the bottles.
All right. And
Which
it's
is
consistently a brand that people... It's not age stated, and it's consistently a brand that people love at its 4 to 6 year age range that it sits on the shelf. So next up is Lux Row.
Lux Row. So this is a single... It was 3 single barrels blended together from their wheat recipe. 68 corn,
To
20%
wheated.
wheat, 12% malted barley, 6 years. But then they toasted the finish after they blended it.
Oh, they
So it
finished
went
it?
into a
Okay.
toasted barrel finish. Toasted caramel honey staves for a rich, full body.
Well, it's like, to harken back to Whiskey Acres, our toasted barrel finish with the wheated mash bill is like, it's so good.
Yeah.
So
But also-
I mean, it tracks.
Rebel.
Mhm.
Rebel. If
Rebel,
you get a
yeah.
good single barrel,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
Yep,
Mhm.
for sure.
And especially at their price points, they're like $49.99 on the shelf for
Right.
barrel proof
Yeah.
Rebel.
And we just talked about Lux Row as part of the MGP.
Yeah, it was in
Acquisition.
the acquisition episode. Exactly.
so-
they have a
so
lot
you-
of resources behind them now
Yes.
where they can go.
I mean,
with
not necessarily
high rye.
that they're throwing that
They
behind
do,
this
These
but
release.
resources
this-
were not there
Right,
when
this-
this when
right.
they actually
This
did
is
this
the
product.
Rebel mash bill.
This
This
should
is-
be their distillate entirely. Yeah. So,
So-
this is pretty, I think, good praise for their particular mash bill and
Absolutely.
distillate.
Mm-hmm.
Proving that they, like you said, the Rebel distillate is actually really holding up against some of the other major Kentucky players.
Yeah. And I
Yeah, it was a great pour. I mean, it wasn't my top pour, but this was a very fantastic pour. It was a great bottle from them for this event, and I really enjoyed the.
yeah.
But like, and that,
One of the
the only
things too,
thing-
I just want to say is, you talked about this in a prior episode about the acquisition and what's going in. One of the very cool things about the experience at their distillery, I got to go in and see what those resources coming into the distillery were doing. They're like, I went in and they're like bringing in their new column still. They're the mass expansion going on at Lux Row right now is out of this world.
well, and that's like what I think needs to be differentiated for them is their resource allocation from MGP isn't necessarily barrel access.
No.
Absolutely
it's
not.
it's
Yeah.
it's investment in the
Monetary.
distillation aspect of the company,
Right,
not
and they
right.
looked at
sourcing.
what they looked at what
you
they're
know,
already
and-
doing. They're putting out this great
Right.
product
Yeah.
that they put into this mix.
The biggest
And-
sleeper bottles on the market, Rebel and Ezra single barrels.
Absolutely.
Under 50
and
bucks for cash strength.
I mean, for this one in particular, I would not have picked this out as a weeded bourbon.
no, me
No.
either.
No, I
No.
would agree with you. It didn't
Yeah,
have
no.
that typical profile of a wheat.
Very I think I'm not a fan in general of weeded bourbon when it's, I'll pick on Buffalo Trace, of the like soft variety, the smooth variety. I want, if you're gonna put wheat in it, I want to taste the wheat and feel its punch.
This had character. This had
And yeah, this is not
complex
that
character.
Complexity
at all. Yeah.
yeah.
And this is, if anything, the wheat is contributing in a similar way to what a rye would contribute. Not necessarily to the same degree as in the terms of like the spiciness, but it's contributing that flavor. It's not just like rounding out the corn to like
It
make
actually-
you
and it-
forget that you're drinking a
and it gave it some
corn
levels.
whiskey,
It gave
you
it
know?
levels of flavor.
Right,
It wasn't,
yeah.
wasn't that one note soft wheat, just keep sipping it.
yes, yeah.
And again, before we tried any of these, we had no idea.
No,
know
we
what
didn't
they
look
were.
at
I
mash
would have
bills.
never have guessed
Right.
it was a wheat.
No,
Could have
yeah,
been, could have
no.
been anything from.
We would
I-
have thought so.
I-
It wasn't that typical smooth, like easy drinker that you
No.
normally see out of like.
Yeah, I think
Buffalo Trace product.
I think of
I would not
all of
have
us, I think D was the only one we thought might have been a wheat, which I think we were correct on. So
Yeah.
props to Lux Row for fooling us on this
I mean,
one.
yeah. Yeah, we said you guys challenged me, I think, to put in a coupon code or that we wouldn't have a coupon code here, but we have some phenomenal Rebel and Ezra picks on the shelf right now. They're $49.99 for barrel proof Lux Row
That we did
and
episodes
Heaven Hill
on?
Distillate, and we did do some episodes on them.
Probably January.
I think
of
so.
last year?
Yeah, I think it was right at the end of last year. But either way, we're gonna do BM Lux Row for 10% off our Gold Eagle Rebel and Ezra barrel picks.
Spell Lux.
LUXROW. So BMLUXROW. 10% off our Lux Row barrel picks. That counts for Rebel and Ezra. We've got, I think, 3 different Ezra picks in right now and 2 different Rebel, just because we feel it's one of the best values out there in Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah, I
Under
was a
$50
big
for
fan of
barrel-proof
the Ezra.
Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah, that Ezra's
Full of
phenomenal.
flavor.
Yeah.
They don't taste like they're youthful at all. A couple
yeah.
of the ones that we have are actually distilled at Heaven Hill, even though now they're completely switched over to all Lux Row distillate. So yeah, BM Lux Row, 10% off our Rebel and Ezra single barrel picks.
Just more evidence that Heaven
Use
Hill
it
is a
online.
goat.
Chime to go.
Online only. Online only. Yeah.
I will say the Rebel for me. That was a great pick. It was in our bracket tasting last year. The Rebel pick that we have lost by 1 vote to Weller Full Proof.
In the Madness?
The
Madness.
barrel pick.
Yeah,
The
you're
Madness
right.
barrel
Yeah.
pick.
There was a
you're right.
bottle that did beat the Weller though.
It was the Lake County.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
we both were on that pick.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
But no, I mean, yeah, like you said, Jake, the typical weeded bourbon is like a Weller. That's what people think of. It's soft, it's easy, but there's not a lot of complexity there. And I think with this Lux Row that we tasted with the Bardstown Collection and the Rebel picks that we have, you're not going to get something as soft as Weller. Same with your makers. We're going to get something with a hell of a lot more flavor and complexity.
Yeah,
And
it's
that
it's,
can't be argued.
yeah. I actually think out of the wheat and mash bills that are out there right now, Lux Row is putting out the most complex and in the flavor profile for a weeded
And
bourbon
affordable.
that is especially affordability. I mean, their products sit there, and they're another one just like I could easily go grab a Rebel Yell or an Ezra off the shelf, just like I would a Heaven Hill bottled in Bond, and never be disappointed with what I grab.
Yeah.
That's another one you can just, absolutely, sure, make that another one, and they're just a great product.
They are a good product.
And the fact that Gold Eagle has got some single barrel picks still sitting there surprises me, especially at the price point, knowing how great the single barrel picks are above the normal product on the shelf. Those are some excellent selections, and getting a coupon code, snag those up because
$44 for a barrel proof Kentucky bourbon.
that's a winner.
The price point on those is fantastic. Yeah, shouldn't even have to be adjudicated.
So now we're moving into the top
Have we made
three.
it to the top
Now
three?
we're in the top
Yeah.
three.
Top 3.
Top
Number
three.
three.
And
Number three.
it's worth noting. I mean, these were number 5 through 1 were all very close, but number 3 barely squeaked past. We're talking a couple decimal points squeaked past the Lux Row.
Yeah.
And I think this was actually the most shocking for me. This distillery has a lot of either love it or hate it type of thing going on. I think the more you dive into this distillery, the more you love it. They just have a lot of different labels and a lot of different things going on. But number 3 is Preservation Distillery.
Preservation, one of the I think it's another overlooked distillery when you're in Bardstown. I mean, they come from a very wonderful female head. She picked and sourced some amazing older product, starting with in Canada and just very very vintage stuff, and made a name by blending and perfecting older product to put in a bottle it's a higher price, but it's age, it's source, and it's one off that you will not find in other distilleries, and it's sourced specifically by them.
Yeah.
But the cool thing with this release, they used their own juice, which was a weeded, pot distilled Kentucky bourbon, which they've been doing and starting to distill their own stuff and gently taking their own juice and taking their source juice. Coming over the past few years, they've been adding more and more of their own distillate to less and less of their own sourced product. And they still, for this release alone, they hand-picked their most precious vintage Kentucky bourbon cask. So everything, whether it was sourced or made by them, was all Kentucky product. Because they wanted to remain true to the spirit of Bardstown in this release for them being a part of this group.
I bet it was probably Beamer Heaven Hill product that they put in there, but
Probably
Heaven Hill, but
Heaven Hill's like half a mile down the road.
Again, which is the goat.
And the go-to for, we're going to help our neighbors out because we survived a fire because we got all help. So
yeah, I mean, like I think preservation. I think a lot of people don't understand who they are. For reference, they are bottling Old Saint Nick.
So Old Saint Nick,
Rare Perfection,
but
which are like super premium brands.
Waddy Boone, so let's back up just a little bit. So they're making Rare Perfection and Very Old Saint Nick, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they purchased those labels a couple years ago.
Yeah, which are like start at 12-year age statements and go up.
They've got different age statements, but the point
it's all sourced blends.
It's all sourced blends.
Yeah.
And the kind of reason why I wanted to talk about this a little bit is because a lot of the Very Old Saint Nick products, Rare Perfection, is Canadian distillate. And I think when a lot of people see Canadian whiskey, they get afraid, they back off, they're not as excited. But
don't be a bitch. It's fine.
This is not malt whiskey distilled in Canada. This is bourbon mash bill in a new charred oak barrel.
It legally just cannot be called bourbon.
It can't be called bourbon just because it's made in Canada and aged in Canada.
A good equivalent of this is God, Dan's gonna kill me. I think it's batch 7 of Found North.
Found North
is a bourbon mash bill distilled in Canada.
15
I think that was Dan's #1 whiskey of last year. Fantastic, absolutely incredible.
Get some very well aged, in quotations, bourbon, if you will, in Canada, because they don't have the heat that we have down here.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a Scotch.
It's a little bit,
not Scotch. I shouldn't say Scotch because that's going to scare people with the peat.
Well, it's
like a Scotland.
Well,
it's a slower aging process because they don't have peak temperature.
Yes.
Well, like that Found North release is an 18-year bourbon for all intents and purposes without the legal label. That's just phenomenally aged. Like and it's not over oaked. It's like the perfect
just very mellow
level of oaking and there's not a big reason to be scared of Canada.
No. Well,
They're
people just
friendly
think of like
people.
Crown Royal and 80 proof.
Well, there's so Canadian rye
That's what people
is I think what people
Whistle
are.
Pig sourcing rye from Canada.
Well,
things like that.
rye is the bigger Canada
Canada
product,
yes.
but there's plenty of distilleries making more or less the equivalent of bourbon in Canada, and people from the U.S. are sourcing that and bottling it. A lot of these distilleries now, like I harp on all the time, are being very transparent about these mash bills, so you can find them and look them up and see what's actually going into this stuff. I think,
And also before that, just taste it.
yeah, and
Just
taste
taste
it.
it.
I think
what do you
old
think?
Old Saint Nick and maybe not Rare Perfection, but I think Old Saint Nick actually tells you the mash bill of
There's a
what's
bottle.
going in.
Different releases. I don't know if they say it on the bottle, but I know they're very transparent. Like
At least about
where
the
it comes
overall
from and-
mash bill
yeah,
or
if
something
can-
like
you can
that.
dig
So
and you can find. But
you can
So there's
if
a
you
Rare
don't like
Perfection 15
rye,
right there. Grab it.
you know,
go grab it. I mean, I think they're producing some phenomenal stuff.
yeah,
and-
the Rare Perfection 15 is unbelievably
and-
good.
And because
it's
bought
fantastic.
these labels and they're kind of
There's an Old Saint
revamping
Nick
them,
up there too.
there might be some bottlings that aren't
Yeah.
as good or aren't as sought after as what they're putting out now. But this is definitely one of those brands where you need to try it with an open mind and just taste it and see what you think. And as we proved here with this Bardstown Collection experiment, their own distillate stacks right up.
Yeah, which they
They
are bottling their
bottling-
own stuff
They
under.
are,
They're
they
just
are
starting to.
right now. When we were down there, I was
This
talking
is a really
about
good bottle.
some of their how they were talking about the process of how they have, I forget the name of which line it is, but that year they released that line every year, and every year it's more and more of their own product and less a source product, to the point where, you know, if they're listening, please correct me, but hopefully they're going to be at the point of having their own juice out by the end of 25, and, you know, maybe getting right into that single barrel program with some of their older juice that's ready to go. And
Yeah, and
as little as what they're producing, I'm sure that's going to be a very small program.
I-
But the fact that they're ready to jump in and join, saying we have product ready
yeah,
that says you
yeah.
can pick a single barrel out of our small number that we produce and say that is going to be the best stuff you're going to pull out of Bardstown, and it was made here.
Yeah, I mean, this presumably a blend because the way they described it is 114.8 proof. Drinks slightly below that,
Oh,
but
yeah.
not like it's super flavorful. I would assume that the majority of this is their own distillate because they're trying to showcase what they can do. So I mean, I think this is a really good showing from them.
Absolutely.
And when you go through Bardstown, it's a quick 30-minute stop. Their tours are literally a half an hour. They do some really cool stuff where you can do like a chocolate pairing with their very rare boars. One of the bottles at that distillery on the experience that they put this bottle against, the Rare Perfection 15, which is their flagship.
Which is
Like multiple double gold
Yeah.
winners. They, you can put what you will about against those, but one of the bottles in the lineup they compared this to and say this will hold up against this is an $800 retail bottle of some of their product, which was like an 18-year, very old Man Winter release of some sort. It was. I mean, they have some
It's
very
another
high
brand that they
end.
make that's good. Old Man Winter.
Yeah, very high end product that they're putting out, and they had, I mean, they have bottles that they'll go do single barrels and release 375s, and it's like 3 bottles of smaller bottles that are 20 $200 for a set of 3 bottles, and they stand behind their product.
Yeah.
I love a company that stands behind their product, and they will never back down and say, we are not putting in front of you the best we have sourced or the best we have made.
Yeah, and the finish on this, you can tell that there's some really old stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just the depth in the finish is pretty. I think by maybe the most complex of the finishes out of this whole series.
It has a very wide range of just dancing on your tongue,
Yes,
playing
yeah.
with all your sensories.
You get punched in the front with the proof point and the flavor impact of that, and then on the end you get a lot of like chocolates and like really dark kind of flavors. It's really good.
Yeah, I think just to speak on the finish real quick, looking back at my scorecard, every whiskey except for one of them, my highest score was my finish. And I remember as I was going through, I was like, am I being just biased because I love the finish so much? But I think it just speaks to whiskeys at these price points. That's kind of what I look for, and I do think a lot of these have a really nice, long, complex finish. And maybe the palate wasn't as good as the finish to me, just because I do tend to like higher proofs, and a lot of these are in the 100 to 110 range.
Yeah, for me the proof point drops off really quick, and the finish is just so flavorful without the proof point. It's just like super enjoyable. So yeah, it's really great.
So moving on here, we have 2 left. The top 2. This one, I mean, these are 2 big names. I don't think they're a big surprise. This is another one that just kind of barely squeaked by Preservation. Jim Beam.
Jim Beam at number 2.
Which,
Not
if they're not in the top
Shouldn't be a
2,
surprise.
what are you doing, Jim Beam?
Yeah.
You know? Like,
So I think one of the coolest things about this is actually the oldest product Jim Beam company has ever released from their brick house at a retail release. It's a 20-year Jim Beam distillate.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's the oldest whiskey the iconic brand has ever released. They didn't give any other details except the 20-year age statement, and said delivers intense flavors of oak, vanilla, and sweet smoke, sure to be the fan favorite. And in our tasting, it lost by a very small margin in terms of point totals for our average across the group. It's a phenomenal product. One of the coolest things on the experience was going in there and in their rick house getting to taste other Jim Beam products at that age, and then getting to taste what they decided to release for the product. They're like, oh, this barrel right here would be released as a Knob Creek, but was older than their 18-year Knob Creeks that are going out to retail. So we were tasting some very old vintages against this one they decided to release to us. And, a lot of us were like, oh, this one's the beam. This one's the beam. We knew there was a beam in there, and obviously knowing it was one of the 7.
Thought what A was the beam?
I thought Log Still for sure was the Beam,
which is a crazy
but it's
thing.
also a distillery I never really had tried before.
No,
so
but I think we tried the 18-year Knob Creek on the podcast, and I think one of the takeaways from that was all that like peanut flavor is like gone at that age statement. Like it's really hard to distinguish.
Little bit of nuttiness, but nowhere compared to normal.
It's not
normal Knob Creek 10-year, 12-year.
It's not distinguishable in the same way that like a typical Jim Beam product is. Yeah.
depth and complexity,
Which, when you take a 20-year and you proof it down and blend it
and also
to what's the proof on this?
109, on
Which
this
is
one.
pretty high, in my opinion, for a 20-year.
It didn't
age
taste like
statement.
109.
Like-
It tasted much lower.
Yeah.
And also the biggest thing to point out was I think it tasted very lively.
Yes.
A lot of times with
Yes.
bourbon, even 15 years old, you just get it's dead, it's fallen flat. You get a lot of oak and
Yeah, you're chewing on a
chewiness.
stave.
Yeah. This was very lively. It
especially
had
on
lots
the
of bright
nose.
fruits,
It's-
dark fruits.
Yeah, there's a lot of bright notes on the nose for because usually you're just expecting like wood and figs and like that
Yeah,
kind of stone fruit
that
kind
super
of
black
stuff, and
cherry,
yeah, and
dark.
but this is very bright fruit forward, and maybe that's the proofing down slightly to
I think
kind of
that could've been a
brightens
big
it
part
up,
of that,
and
'cause I'm sure, I think their product goes in at 125 barrel proof, and it's sitting there for 20 years. You would expect. Obviously, I think also to get to 500 bottles,
you
in a
have to,
20
yeah.
year,
And we were
there was
trying to
multiple
fudge the
barrels,
math on that a little
fudging the
bit.
math that had to go
There's
in.
probably at least 5 barrels
Yeah.
blended into that
Yeah,
to get
but
to
and
500.
that's
at least.
even the Heaven Hill, the Elijah Craig 18. We were trying to do a little bit of math comparison to figure out what was what, and that even is brighter than an 18-year should really be at cast strength, because it's bottled at 90
I think they
proof or
picked a
whatever.
very, very good proof level for
Yes,
it.
for sure.
And I think proofing it down to that 109, which I'm sure they had to proof this down.
And they probably did multiple
took
batches
away-
of proofs to get this.
I think that took away from what you expect from those very high age bourbons that are actually Kentucky bourbon, where you get that super oak chewy. I think that has brought those bright notes out, and the team at Beam, obviously hundreds of years combined experience in tasting and blending and making find the perfect X on every rickhouse they have out there. Had something in mind going into this.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only thing they get that, out of this is well, why did someone from Claremont get into the Bardstown Collection? But obviously, being so close to Bardstown and what they pour into the community, they're always going to back something of this nature for this kind of cause.
Yeah, and I mean, even on the palate, you can taste the oak. It's not overpowering.
It didn't stand out as being a 20-year.
No,
being the
like
oldest.
yeah, you for sure. None of us picked
had
that this
whole
was.
Yeah, it had the
Yes.
complexity. It had
Yeah.
more fruitiness and sweetness and liveliness than
Absolutely.
What you would
It wasn't
expect
even
at
the
that age.
darkest. It wasn't
No,
even the darkest
no,
in
like-
color, which surprised me because I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, we should be able to pick the 20-year right away."
But I think that's the Beam team doing what they do best, and setting the product at the correct proof point, not sacrificing the flavor for the sake of the age statement, and all that kind of stuff. They're trying to put out the best thing they possibly can. 109 proof, of which is probably a batch of dozens of different proof points that they probably tried it at.
Oh, I bet they went
And
half a
every-
point at a time.
Yeah. So, they probably dialed this in to perfection, which, clearly this is the number 2 spot. So, I mean, they absolutely nailed this. I mean, the Knob Creek 18 is phenomenal at 100 proof.
20?
100 proof.
100.
100 proof.
This is slightly above that.
Also
I think
slightly
it's-
above the price point, and I would take this
Yeah,
all
well,
day.
yeah.
I'll take this all- I would drink this. You give me this
So,
any day of the week.
The Jim Beam was very good. Number 2.
Yeah.
Time to move on to number 1. Our
Number
final-
Process of elimination.
Process
If
of
you've been listening for
elimination.
this long,
Who's left?
you haven't turned us
Could
off
be
by
more
now.
fitting.
Maybe it couldn't. Maybe it could. We're missing Dan for this big reveal. He would love to hear this, but
He would be so pissed.
he'd be pissed. I don't know what he would think. We got to blind him on it to really see what he thinks.
Yeah.
But number one, Bardstown Bourbon Company,
Yeah, which honestly, I'm surprised
and it wasn't
by a
I'm-
lot.
I'm
surprised.
very surprised too. But the last 4 on this list are all within 2.4 points on our.
That they're
rating
all
scale.
very close. Yeah.
And then this was 4 points ahead of Jim Beam.
Yeah.
So
And
this was
thi-
the
this
clear
was
favorite.
my
clear
favorite
favorite.
too.
The clear
Yes.
winner.
I think
the
this-
Favorite as well?
Everyone except maybe
It
one
wasn't
person.
my favorite, but
Two
it was
people
my
then.
second.
Yeah.
And
This was my number 2, I believe, in overall points.
This
was
pulled
special
way
one
ahead.
right here. This one was good.
Yeah. And like, I
So
don't.
suck it, Dan.
So suck it hard, Dan. The for anybody that's been to Bardstown and been through the rick houses, you can see how much contract distilling they're actually doing for other people. And whether or not you like their origin series, I would kind of set that aside and look at their discovery series.
you don't like the origin series, but
I'm not a huge fan of the origin series.
Black
The
Label's fantastic.
I think they're all good for $50.
Yeah.
Nah, I think it could be better. The rye, I
We
think
just
I
had
like
Golden
the
Eagle
rye is
tasting
okay.
for
The rye is
Bardstown
decent.
last week, the
Masterclass.
master class.
I think for $50,
That-
they're all.
We
good.
poured.
I-
you poured
well,
all of the all
Jake,
4
you-
of the Oregon.
I'm being picky. You
You've
have
got
but
some much more expensive whiskeys in your collection.
no,
You've
but
got-
even
you've got
their
all the
discovery series, but their discovery series is like fantastic. Like every single time, their discovery series is
I don't know,
great.
every time. They're good.
One of the
But their origin series is not like a piece of the
Compared-
discovery
compared to
series
other
every like, you know.
everyday $50 bourbons from other
All right.
distilleries. They're good. They're not
But I mean,
unicorns.
look
They're
at the
not
discovery
chasing down,
series.
but they're available.
Yes.
They're good.
Yeah. But the discovery series, I think, is really what their like potential, I guess, is. And the discovery series is fantastic.
One of
And
the-
more and more becoming their distillate in every single release. Go ahead and read off what they have.
Well, this is the funny thing I wanted to add to this. Bardstown puts all their name on how we put everything on the bottle, everything that is in everything we do.
Are they not transparent about this
This
one?
is the least transparent release of all 7 mash bills. The only thing they released to the Bardstown Collection website, I'm sure they may have released something later. This was their release, and it's not. There's nothing on the bottle except the proof. And their release note, here's what we're releasing for the collection: blending innovation with classic Kentucky flavor. Bardstown Bourbon Company's offering to the collection this year is a layered, complex balance of ripe cherry and toasted oak, leading to cinnamon, maple, and spearmint.
So jack shit.
They did
okay.
not give
It's
what
dead
their
on,
blend.
though. Tasting
Oh, they're
But
tasting
they're-
notes, but they talk about transparency. They're the least transparent.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot of heavy metal
Release.
products,
I
right?
was gonna say this makes me think that there's some sourced stuff in here.
Probably.
Because they probably.
But
didn't wanna
they-
admit that.
I mean,
know.
they're probably at 6. I don't know what's the most recent discovery. 12
Discovery 12 is their latest.
is like 60% their own.
No,
No.
Discovery is mostly. I don't think
Sourced.
any of it's their own.
No.
Sometimes a little bit of
The
it is.
Discovery 12 is their highest percentage of their own, but it's still a very small
Maybe
percent.
it's-
Yeah.
Oh,
'cause
really?
Discovery
Oh, okay.
is all about discovering other whiskeys.
Yeah.
So they're all.
Maybe I'm
about,
thinking about
Hey, we're gonna.
the last Fusion release then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
Okay.
Discovery is about discovering other whiskeys. I think they have access and have a lot.
Oh, they do,
of
yeah.
old barrels from all over the world. Like a lot of their releases
Well,
have other countries and states that nobody.
I mean,
knew
they have
Nobody knew distilleries were.
like for
Discovery
Cullen.
12.
Gary's got the Discovery 12 right here.
They have the
We're
Cullen
gonna get
from
to it right
Ireland. They have all those wine cask releases. They have the rum cask releases.
So yes,
Yeah,
actually, this
so-
is their first Discovery series with their own juice, and it's only 8% of their 6-year.
Oh, I thought that was.
This is the first
Okay.
Discovery with
So
their own.
normally, I don't think there's any. I think they just
This
started
is the
putting
Discovery
okay,
12 is the first
Discovery
Discovery with their
That-
own
that
juice
sounds
in
right.
Okay, so fusion is what they were putting
Fusion
their own
is
in.
fusing
Okay.
their own with sourced,
Alright, I'm
and then
mixing
they
those up.
discontinued it now because they have
Yes,
origins.
right. Correct.
Fusion's
So-
dead,
okay.
There's no more.
No more.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
they don't need to do that anymore because they have the origins.
But I'm sitting here.
So
sipping
anyway,
on it
so
right
none
now,
of this
and
is
it's gonna
Bardstown.
happen again.
Well, it could be,
They
but
didn't
also
tell us.
Bardstown blended it, and we all know
Yes,
that blending is an art, and there's a lot that goes into blending, just
Especially,
like there is distilling and aging.
A little bit of Dickel, right? That's what makes every blend better.
Almost everything has like 12-year Dickel in it, and
I
you
think
know,
their
The
description
blending
though.
binder.
I think their
that's
description
why
does-
my blend from last year was the best, even though it wasn't voted the
it's
best.
actually last place. I'm gonna step
Step
in and
back.
I'm gonna be Dan right here, right now. Your blend sucked. It was last place. You worked. I'm only doing this because I know Dan's cringing if he's listening. You worked the longest. On
I don't
your
care
blend,
about Dan.
and it was last place.
I do
But
think
my-
based on their description, I want to say.
That's what really killed you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But my second blend, if we would have ranked the second blend that I did, I think it would have came out in first.
If.
Mm,
But so
if we'll see next
back
we
to
year.
the
were already about.
Bardstown.
We were all 10 pours in on that second one.
Yeah. back to the Bardstown. It is the highest proof, which is worth noting. A lot of us
119.
Yes.
119.4.
Yeah.
A lot of us do like higher proof. I do think it carried a lot more boldness of flavor on the palate, a lot more complexity all throughout.
While not carrying that proof point, I would add
It
too.
was pure delicious.
Yeah,
It
like
is-
it didn't.
it's a
It didn't
delightful
taste
pour.
hot. It tasted just very balanced and
Yeah, I mean it
Hit all the notes.
hit all the notes. Yeah, you got your fruits, you got your caramels, your vanillas, and you
Yeah,
got
It
your
even
oak.
had a little hint of black
revisiting-
tea in there. It was-
Yeah, revisiting with all the information, like this does taste like a very, very good blend, rather than a single or a couple barrels together. You know,
If you
from
find a
one
single barrel
distillery.
that tastes like this, I want
Hey,
all of it.
yeah, right. Like this is probably I would assume that they
Yeah.
put some percentage of their own whiskey into this.
I think based on their description, it does sound like they use Kentucky only. I'm gonna
Yeah,
guess.
I would think
And
so.
I bet there's a good portion of their own juice in it.
I would even bet that they limited it to Bardstown,
Bardstown's
area.
sourced area. Yeah.
I mean, because like
Where's Jasmine?
as much as Dan hates them, like I think they're a pretty decent distillery,
I mean,
and
they've
like
got
they're
loads of connections with how many brands
Yeah.
they distill for.
well, and like I mean, they have so much access, and like I mean, beyond
We
the
don't have
contract
Dan's
distilling
political
alone,
money-
and
political
then
money
yeah,
here.
we're trying not to polarize the political base here, but I mean beyond their contract distilling, their sourcing capabilities are insane
Right.
as well. So yeah, I mean they probably have access to
It's
this.
a great. They do what they came in to intend to do, and they do it extremely
right,
well. They made the connections. They source great. They
Blend
let
great.
people come in and say, "This is the recipe I want. Blend it for me, and we'll give it right back to you." Like they
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
everything they came out shooting for.
But-
with deep pockets, but do it right. Like if you're gonna hit, going back to your 100 million, dream distillery, they came out with deep pockets, and they said, "We're gonna do this, this, and this," and It's working.
Yeah, right.
Obviously working.
But I mean, this is basically a Discovery series release.
It is a Discovery series.
Yeah.
I think it's all putting homage to the Bardstown Collection. I believe it's all Kentucky stuff. I believe they put their own product in it, and they sat down and said, "Hey, this is what better way to do it if this is the Bardstown Collection release? Our name's already on it for everybody.
Right,
We better
yeah.
put the best one out there for the collection."
Yeah, I mean, and like, we talked about the balancing of flavors, and like this one I think hits the whole range of bourbon flavors.
Mhm.
Like I mean, like you get bright
Oak,
fruit all the way
fruit,
through to
Caramels,
yeah.
vanillas, it's
Creme brulee. It's got a hint of mint.
It's what
something.
you want.
There's got to
I-
be a little
Relax.
rye in there
It drinks
somewhere.
below
Yeah.
its proof. It's got a lot going on.
Yeah, and
is
at this
really good
proof
bourbon.
point, the way it drinks, yeah, I mean, this is why this was like everyone's favorite
No,
for a
there's-
reason.
I-
So
There's not a single bad thing I can say about this pour.
There's
Yeah.
not a lot of bottles in this price range that I think are worth it, but this is an absolute buy if you ever
Yeah.
stumble across this.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm a little upset having Hill didn't come in first
Well,
place.
you
Well,
still got the
This
shot.
is going back. So going back to the
Yeah.
mix up on the bottle release, the reveals.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our people in the back had a mix up of the letters, and originally said that Heaven Hill
Was the number
this
one.
pick.
And I was so pumped. I was so ready to just do 45 minutes of shitting on Dan.
He
However,
doesn't even care about Heaven Hill. He just wants to shit on Dan.
yeah.
Well, you can still shit on Dan because it's Bardstown.
I can still shit on Dan. I even like God. We went to Bardstown for our first tour of the second day of our visit, and we all had the whole thing, and like we
the
did
library, the tour, everything. Yeah.
well, and like they had like 2 or 3 like signature old fashions at the bar, and like we were all just blown away.
yeah, barrel aged right on the bar. Right
And
in
Dan's
the
like
barrel.
the whole time. Dan's like, I don't like the Pritzkers, blah blah. He's like, but this whiskey's really good. It's like, all right, Dan. Like, what do you want to do? But I mean, like, God, I mean, they know what they're doing. They're doing really good stuff. It's evident.
It is. This is just a flagship pour to say, hey, we're putting our name out there. When it comes to, if you're going to do this and you're going to put your name on the bottle and you're going to say we're going to put out our best stuff, I will take this bottle over any of the discoveries they've done.
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah,
for sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
And some of the discoveries I put in my top 5 whiskeys of the year.
but
Oh,
this-
yeah,
this,
yeah.
I think
past.
is
This is just taking that discovery
Yeah.
and saying, this is Bardstown Collection.
If I have to
The job
nitpick,
is put your best foot forward. They nailed it.
the only thing I'm gonna nitpick is I wish they would be transparent about it.
And I'm sure there's
I'll
somewhere
net-
out
that's
there
my
that
only
they've
nitpick,
released
but,
it.
yeah.
but
maybe there's a reason they haven't, and maybe eventually we will find
it
out.
might be
but
Discovery 13. Yay.
Maybe. So
There's always some Dickel in there, though.
there has to
Wait, no, wait.
It's a blending.
binder.
It's a blending component. It's a binder.
There is no
Well, there's
Dickel
always-
in Discovery 12.
There's
That's
no
what- that's why
Tennessee?
everyone
All
wanted it so
Kentucky.
Oh,
All Kentucky.
interesting. Okay.
much. So as we wrap this episode up, I think we should just go around and what's your coolest? What's your takeaway from this experience? What do you want to tell the listeners about doing this whole tasting with the Bardstown?
Matt, you want to
Matt?
start?
Sure. So my number one takeaway is it's a great, I'll call it an event for charity to help out the community. I love that they did. And the other part that really got to me was just how different everything was. Like everybody took their own, aspect about what was going to be their best product, and it was very different across the board. Filling different components, whether it was wheat, not. A very
Age
cool experience to see what everybody thought was their like flagship product, I'll call it, and it was a really neat event to do with a bunch of people, and kind of how everybody thought of everything, and especially when we didn't know what was in anything, and whether it was weeded or not, or hot stilled or regular. It was a very cool event, especially with Gary adding in that the extra bottle here that kind of the control that really worked out. So. Overall, it was a great experience, great time with a lot of friends, and which is what Bourbon is all about. So really enjoyed that, and just some of the surprises along the way were pretty.
All right. Well, I got two quick takeaways. First and foremost, I think just want to thank Gary for securing all these bottles and
Yeah, for sure.
giving us the opportunity to taste them. I've only had one of these before, so it was really cool to sit down and taste all these. And I think if you're listening out there and you're like, oh, I'm never gonna get to taste all these, find a group of buddies and just get together and set up something like this. Have everyone bring a bottle. Have everyone bring 2 bottles and just blind them, line them up, and take notes and rank them all. Because that's what bourbon's about, is getting together with friends and people who you can share discussions with about it, and then just kind of tasting through and working through the different flavors that you're getting from the different
This is the
bourbons.
product of a whiskey club, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exactly.
You don't need the Bardstown Collection. You don't need rare bottles. You just need bottles that you think are good and cool people to get together with and taste. And I think the other thing that I really liked about this was that there was no criteria for the distilleries. There was no age statement. It was just, hey, this is what we want to show you from our distillery. And same price from distillery to distillery. Don't get caught up on proof. Don't get caught up on an age statement. But just here's some different whiskeys that we're all proud to show you. So I think that was really cool.
For me, it was having been the only one who had tried them all before, but I got to try them at the distillery. You do kind of go in with prejudgment trying them the first time around. So for me to be able to sit down and try them all, not knowing which one was which, and it's been 5 months since I've tried them. That was an amazing experience to go through the notes and pick out the nuances, but also being able, Jake, you just put it the best way. Like, this is what sitting down and drinking bourbon with friends is about. Like, after I sourced extra collections when I was down there, I won't put out there how all that went down, but the fact that I could say, hey, I happen to have a full set of these. You're my friends. You are my bourbon lovers. I've been drinking bourbon with you for years and years. Let's get together. Let's all try them. Let's see our thoughts on them. I think it just is the epitome of what bourbon is supposed to be about. And that was the coolest thing for me. Come into my home. I want to host. My wife was super pumped about this. She's like,
Shout out to
I'm going to
Holly.
make
Thank you for
great-
coordinating this.
great food and host and decorate that house, all that. It really just is the epicenter of tasting bourbon with friends, talking about it, enjoying it, pouring another, and just having a good time and getting to the root of what we all enjoy at the heart. We all love bourbon, and we love, and once again, the cause behind it, going back into the community where bourbon really started in the heart of America, in Bardstown, Kentucky, was huge.
Yeah, I think for me it was just the experience with everybody. Like, we do the master classes all the time at Gold Eagle, and like this was basically another master class, and like it's really cool to get to do something so exclusive like this. And like it's funny because like we were all kind of particularly respectful about not like trying to influence each other in this particular case. But I mean, the stuff that we took away from it, and then being all completely wrong about a lot of it was super fun, and like it's cool. You know, like and being all like, you know, quote unquote bourbon snobs, to get kind of slapped in the face by the results is fun sometimes, and being like, what, you know, like I can't believe that Bardstown ran away with us, you know, or whatever is like really, really fun and unexpected, and it's cool to share it with, you know, 10 other people or 9 other people, you know. So yeah, it's cool to get to do this stuff with a larger group of people and really do something unique. And like, we don't get to do this that often. Usually it's just me, Jake, and Dan, and Dan ruins it all the time. But I mean, you know.
But no, yeah, I mean, it's one thing for us all to sit at our houses and taste.
Right,
We
and like
want to taste and talk about what we're
Yeah.
talking about on that episode. But you know, going back to what I said, I think this shows that, hey, find some friends who live nearby, bring a bottle or two, have somebody blind pour them, and just talk about them and rank them.
Yeah, and like you don't have to get crazy. Like
No, yeah.
you don't need to make a Facebook group. You don't need to make a website. Just like get a couple friends together and be
Piece
like,
of
hey,
paper and write down some notes.
once a month we're gonna sit down and drink some whiskey and
Yeah.
have fun and you know, whatever. Like it doesn't have to be a whole like structured thing. Like just have fun, you know.
And I would say if you don't have that, I don't know where to start. Go to blind tasting every month, right? I mean,
Gold Eagle hosts a lot of
Almost
tasting
every
stuff,
week.
master
Yeah,
classes.
go to Matt.
so there's a lot of opportunity
Yeah,
to do this even if
right.
you're
I mean,
just beginning in this.
if you're trying to meet people, go to the Lake County
We
Yeah.
got a
Whiskey Club
tasting coming up here in a
Facebook
few
group.
weeks.
There's
Which-
like 5 tickets left for the.
I think
The-
there's about
the big
5
one.
tickets
They'll,
left
they'll
to the-
probably sell out by the time this episode airs.
Maybe yeah.
But if
Um,
not, there is.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good time to kind of wrap this one up and a good time for some plugs. So,
But you can find whiskey clubs wherever you
right,
are.
yeah, wherever
like,
you're listening
Start
from,
one in your subdivision.
you'll
Yeah.
find some
Seriously,
whiskey
Right.
clubs.
it's not
It
hard.
doesn't need to be formal, like Jake
Yeah.
said. It can be just, hey, you know, you 3, 4 guys or girls want to get together tonight, and everyone bring a bottle and let's just taste it and talk about it. But
Yeah.
if you are in Lake County or near Lake County, I would suggest you join the Lake County Whiskey Club Facebook group. Matt here, thank you for joining us, is the founder of the group. You want to touch on just a little bit about what you guys
Sure.
do?
I mean, the club is really about kind of what we did tonight. It's about getting together and having some opportunity to share a common love for women and talk about it and grow. Expert, I'll say, you know, kind of just discuss with others. We do events pretty much monthly at Gold Eagle. A lot of blind tastings. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people get together and have a good time with other same interest. Barrel picks, which are awesome, and we like to involve our members in some of those and enjoy picking some great barrels with some like-minded people. So it's really just a community for bourbon lovers. So love to have anybody who's interested. Obviously, no cost to join, and just want to share a love for a product that we can all enjoy together.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good engagement in the group
Absolutely.
too, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
people like, you know, post what they're drinking, you know,
Sure,
on
what
the
they're
weekend
drinking,
or what
they
the
like,
whatever.
what they
Like,
don't
yeah,
which is awesome. That's what we're about.
There's
asking for
everything from-
suggestions, which is cool.
Ask
you
you
know.
what you like. To, you know, there's some brag posts out there like, hey,
Everybody's flexing. Let's.
I might have posted my picture, my 19-year, 4-month, 4 roses single barrel.
I will say the big thing that we do enjoy is we're not a group that's about selling or trading. It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
It's not a marketplace
It's
at all.
more about
which is
just
nice.
sharing something that we all enjoy and creating community.
Well,
That's
it's
what we're about.
and people are sharing the wealth when they find it, you know. So
I
it's
found this
good.
crazy.
Yeah.
I found this. Hey, have you guys tried this? I never would have thought this is one of the greatest bourbons I've ever tasted, and I've never heard of this brand. Have you guys heard of it?
Yeah, right.
Tell me more.
Or even like the other day, somebody, God, I should find out who it is, but somebody was like, "Hey, rumor on the street is that Russell's 10-year is actually 13 or 15-year-old. You know, like go find these particular SKUs or whatever." It's like that's cool shit to know.
You're not
Like, you know,
promoting.
like
Well, to I don't know, to squash that really quick.
well, look,
But-
like I mean,
No,
maybe,
no,
whether
it's-
that's true or not,
Things
but like you
things
know,
things like that are really cool. Things like
Yeah.
that are really cool. I will say, if you're listening now and you hadn't heard about that, we've had hundreds of people come through the store looking for those laser codes on the bottles. They're probably all picked over, but there is a rumor that the Russell's 10 it has Russell's 15-year in it on some of the laser codes. My quick takeaway is, if the whiskey was actually good at 15 years,
They would
would they
bottle that
really
in.
put it in the
Yeah.
10-year-old bottle? And also, it's at 90 proof in the
Yeah,
10-year-old
it's
Proof
bottle.
down, yeah.
Yeah, so
I
it's.
believe that they've actually said that that's not true.
I'm sure they probably did.
Yeah.
But it got a lot of people to buy Russell's 10
Yeah,
off the
yeah,
shelf who normally
but
wouldn't.
sometimes that is the case
Sometimes
in certain
things like that happen,
SKUs.
but-
and,
This
But-
particular one was not.
But
as
I
good.
Yeah,
the
but-
main takeaway is, come on, if they had 15-year bourbon that was good, would they really put it in a 10-year-old bottle at 90 proof?
The
Even if they're tricking people and it's good at 10 years, you know, like,
Maybe-
I mean,
Come on, if you had 15-year bourbon that was not so good, throw it in like a muscatel barrel or some kind of
Yeah.
finishing barrel and change it up. But another conversation for another episode.
Yeah.
I think we're over our time.
We're
limit
way
here.
over,
This
but
way
is
it's
over.
the longest Bourbon Matters podcast to record.
I think it is.
Yeah. For sure. Well, there was one or two that we split into 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm going to quickly plug Gold Eagle. GoldEagleWine.com. Shop our whole entire inventory. See what we have in stock. Sign up for events at goldeaglewine.com/events. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. Use the BM Lux Row coupon code for 10% off our Rebel or Ezra barrel picks. Gary, I don't know if you have anything to say since you hosted this great event. Thank you again so much. We couldn't have done this without you.
All I can say is thank you for joining me at the house, enjoying amazing bourbon with me. I look forward to doing more of these. I've done a few barrel picks with the Lake County Whiskey Club. I've gone with Jake on picks for single barrels for the store. Look to continue doing so and hosting more of these type of events.
No, that's great. And then, Jake, where can we listen to Bourbon Matters?
I haven't done any Lake County Whiskey Club picks, but I hope Matt will invite me to some. You can watch us on Spotify and YouTube. You can listen to us on any podcast platform. Like, subscribe, follow, share. I hope you listen to the entire episode because everything in this was fantastic content. I'm super happy, even though this is like a 2-hour podcast, but this is a lot of fun. I'm super grateful for Gary for hosting and sharing all this whiskey with us. This was awesome. I don't know what to say besides fuck you, Dan. You should have come.
Where you missed out. Vodka won.
Yeah, you're just selling shitty vodka, so I don't know why you're. Just kidding. Go buy whiskey. Here's vodka
Hey,
or
Whiskey
whatever.
Acres is
but-
wonderful.
Go support Whiskey Acres.
Dan is
It's good
putting in
stuff.
hard work
Dan
for a
is,
wonderful
yeah.
product.
Yeah,
We
check
love it,
out
man.
Barrel 1250
Barrel 1250.
is our the recent pick from Whiskey Acres. Absolutely phenomenal. It's a rye.
The only
Mash
rye
bill.
bourbon they've ever released, and the only GW yeast strain, I think it was. But
Yeah, keep an eye out.
Yeah.
It might be on some of our top whiskey lists for the year. So
okay.
keep an eye out.
All right. Well, cheers, guys. Thank you
Cheers,
for listening.
guys.
Thank you guys for joining.